What is up, everybody? It is time. The next episode of Mondays in Middle-earth, and we are here back for another read-through of the Appendices of the Lord of the Rings, specifically the third section of the first appendix, which is the section on Eriador, Arnor, and the Heirs of Isildur. Now, if you've been following since the beginning, I don't really have a set anything for this show. I just kind of read and try to get these 20 to 30 minutes long. So I don't know how much of the appendices we're going to get through today. But we are winding down towards the end of The Lord of the Rings, towards the end of Return of the King in its totality. Technically we finished The Lord of the Rings, but the appendices, in my opinion, are it's like fluff, you know. But it's part of the book, so we're going to get through it. And then we'll get to the Silmarillion after that. So for those of you who've been following along, thanks so much for sticking through it. For those of you who support financially, an even bigger thanks, because the bills do get paid because of the support of you. The advertising pays a tiny fraction of what I make through YouTube, but the vast majority, I mean like 85-90% of what I make is from super chats, super thanks, and memberships. So thanks to those of you who do support. If you can, this is the part of video where I say, if it's during the premiere and you're here while it's premiering, you can do a super chat. There's a button down there. Otherwise, if you're here after, when you're watching it after the upload's been finished, you can do the super thanks down below. Also on any YouTube shorts. And of course, the memberships. Those are recurring monthly. Great way to start out. $3 a month up to, I think, $25 a month. Various cool things, perks for our members here on YouTube. So please support however you can to keep this show moving forward and keeping the bills paid so that I can continue to do this full time. Otherwise, I'll have to go to get a different job, and then you won't get these. So if you appreciate it, you know what to do. Got something in my eye there. Eriador, Arnor, and the heirs of Isildur. Eriador being the name of all of the lands between the Misty Mountains and the Blue. In the south, bound by the Grey Flood and the Glenduin that flows into it above Tharbad. One of the things I love about playing Lord of the Rings online is they have the map laid out in such a way that you could very easily see this is Eriador, this is Gondor, this is Rohan, etc., etc. Because they've taken the time to really flesh out those maps. It's also one of the reasons I love that game so much. As an MMO, it's not really an MMORPG these days, but there are multiplayer components. But it's just a great game if you like exploring Middle-earth. If you haven't played it before, this is my promo to say go do it. And if you want to hang out with me from time to time, you can join me on the Landroval server. And it says here, at its greatest, the kingdom of Arnor included all of Eriador, except the regions beyond the Lune and the lands east of Greyflood and Loudwater, which were the kingdoms of Rivendell and Holland. And then beyond the Lune was Elvish country, where no men went, but dwarves dwelt and still dwell on the eastern sides of the Blue Mountains, in the southern parts of the Gulf of Lune, where they have mines that are still in use. And it says for this reason, dwarves were accustomed to using the Great Road east, as they had done for long years before we came to the Shire. Oh, wait, by the way, who is this being written from the point of view of? Because it's in parentheses, and it says here, this has got to be Gimli, because he's talking about the dwarves using the road east for long before we came to the Shire. Or is this somebody else? Anyway, maybe it'll tell me later. Talks a little bit here about Círdan and the shipwright. In the days of the kings, most of the high elves that still lingered in Middle-earth dwelt with Círdan or in the seaward lands of Lindon, though if any now remain, they are few. And then we get into this section on the North Kingdom and the Dunedain. And after Elend, this is going to be the fun stuff where they blend, Tolkien blends a little bit of genealogy with storytelling, which is kind of cool because it talks about here that after Elendil and Isildur, there were 8 high kings of Arnor. There was Eärendil. Oh my god. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of names here. I don't really think we need to get into these too much. But it does talk about how the realm was divided into 3 additional kingdoms later on. Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardalon. Well, all names that are, by the way, in Lord of the Rings Online. They do great. I'm going to keep promoting that. They ought to pay me to promote it. I promote it a lot. Arthedain was northwest and included the lands between Brandywine and Lune. and land north of the Great Road as far as the Weather Hills, while Radaur was in the northeast and lay between the Ettin Moors, the Weather Hills, and the Misty Mountains. Cordeland was in the south, along the Brandywine, the Grey Flood, and the Great Road. And in Arthedain, it says the line of Isildur endured, but the line perished in Cardolan and Radaur. Often strife between the kingdoms, of course, as there always is, which hastened the waning of the Dunedain. Says here, one of the chief matters of debate was the possession of the Weather Hills and the lands westward towards Bree. So arguing over land and titles. Man, it happens to everybody. This is, by the way, mirrored in medieval history because that's where Tolkien was drawing his references from, etc. Nice little tidbit here. The Tower of Amansul held the chief Palantir of the North, and the other two were kept by the Arthedain. And in the beginning of the reign of Malvagil of Arthedain, evil came to Arnor. Dun dun dun! For at that time the realm of Angmar rose in the north beyond the Ettin Moors, and there gathered many evil men and orcs and other fell creatures. This is ninth in parentheses. It says here, the lord of that land was known as the Witch King, but it was not known until later that he was actually the chief of the Ringwraiths who had come north with the sole intent of destroying the Dunedain, because he saw hope in their disunion while Gondor was still strong. So still working for Sauron, but in the shadows, in secret for many years, and then coming forth again as the Witch King of Angmar. Hey everyone, Renfail here with the commercial part of the video where I say, hey, if you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. And thanks to all of our supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, our highest members, our guild champions, Crazy's Relative, Remy D here on YouTube. And don't forget, if you want to support, it's really easy. You can do the memberships below, the Adventurers Guild, 3 different tiers. There's also the super thanks on any uploaded video or YouTube short that you find. There's also, of course, the super chats and stickers that you could do on any live stream or premiere, and the Patreon page if you want to dive into the fantasy world that I have with my brother and my wife, which is a tabletop game, a point-and-click adventure game, and a fantasy book series. All are great ways to keep this channel going and me going full-time. Thanks again for those of you who support. Let's get back to the video that you're watching now. So this is a whole story about how in the days of Argileb, son of Malvagil, the kings of Arthedain claimed lordship of all Arnor, although the claim was resisted by Rudhuar, where the Dunedain were few. But because the power there had been seized by an evil lord of the Hillmen who was in league with Angmar, and this is where Argileb fortified the Weather Hills, but was slain in battle with Rudhuar and Angmar. Then Arvoleg, son of Argileb, with the help of Cardolan and Lyndon, drove back the enemies from the hills, and for many years they held in force a frontier along the Weather Hills and the Great Road. And this was when Rivendell was besieged. I do not remember Rivendell being besieged at all. I'm hoping this is explained more in the Silmarillion, because this is one of those things where I read it and I'm like, that sounds super interesting. Please tell me more. And then it just skips because it goes forth to then a great host came out of Angmar in 1409 and crossed the river to Cardolan and surrounded Weathertop. There the Dunedain were defeated, and Arvelog was slain. The Tower of Amansul burned, although the Palantir was saved and carried back to Fornost. But at this point, Rudhuar was occupied by evil men under Angmar's rule. Cardolan was ravaged. The Dunedain fled west. Erefor, son of Arva, was not yet full grown, and with aid from Círdan, he repelled the enemy from Fornost in the North Downs. And then the Dunedain of Cordolan held out in Tirn Gorthad, known as the Barrow-Downs, or they took refuge in the forest beyond. By the way, is Bombadil living in the forest at that point in time? Food for thought. Doesn't say anything here right away. Angmar was for a time subdued by the help from Lyndon, and also from Rivendell, because it says there that Elrond brought help from the Misty Mountains out of Lorien. I don't know if it's Misty Mountains. It just says brought help from over the mountains out of Lorien. Yeah, it's Misty Mountains. Herpa-derpy. Anyway, it says here that the stewards, which were hobbits, the stewards who dwelt in the angle between Horwell and Loudwater, fled west and south because of the wars. And some returned to the Wilderland and dwelt beside the Gladden, becoming a riverside people of fishers. Were those like the precursors to Gollum? I don't know. Ooh, it says a plague came into Eriador from the southeast during the days of Argoleb II. The hobbits and other people suffered greatly, it says. And this is when the Dunedain of Cardolan came to an end, and the evil spirits of Angmar and Ruduar entered into the Barrow-Downs and dwelt there. Very interesting. So if you ever, again, more promo for Lord of the Rings Online. There's a quest there for I think it's the Prince of Cardolan or the Lord of Cardolan. There's a quest there to deal with one of the Barrow-wights. Really cool stuff. And there's rumor here. It says the legend says that Frodo was imprisoned in the grave of the last Prince of Cardolan who fell in the War of 1409. And then in 1974, the power of Angmar rose again, and the Witch King came down upon the Arthedain before winter was ended. He captured Fornost, drove the remaining Dunedain over the Lune, amongst them the sons of the king, until King Arvedwy fled with some of his guard, and he hid in the tunnels of the old dwarf mines near the end of the mountains, but was driven last to hunger to seek the help of the Lossoth, which are the snowmen of Forakel, which is another cool area you can explore in that game. This is going to turn into a Lord of the Rings Online video, not a Mondays in Middle Earth video. Okay, just talking here. The Witch King was said to make frost or thaw at his will. The people of Farokel did not help the king willingly, but partly out of fear for his weapons and partly out of pity for the gaunt king and his men, they gave them a little food and built them snow huts. Though when Círdan heard from Arnath of the king's flight to the north, he sent a ship to Farokel to seek for him. But it was in March, still icy. It says when the snowmen saw the ship, they were amazed and afraid because they had never seen ships before. At least within their memories, it says. So the Lossoth, in their fear and superstition, told Arvedwy, "Don't get on that sea monster, man." It's crazy. You know, it's a scary thing. The witch. Wait until the Witch King comes home. In summer, his power wanes, but now his breath is deadly and his cold armor is long. But it says Arvedwy did not take his counsel. Gave the Lossoth his ring. And it says here, by chance of foresight, the ship had not reached the open sea when a great storm came, and a blinding storm from the north drove the ship upon the ice, and the mariners of Círdan were helpless. And at night the ice crushed the hull, the ship foundered, and Arvedwy perished. And with him the Palantiri were buried in the sea. Was that the two? How many Palantir went down with him? It says the Palantiri, which is plural. But is it two of them? Because it said that those one was with the king and these were two. It doesn't actually say how many. There's a note here with a number, but I haven't gone to the end to see what that is. The Shire folks survived in the meantime, and they sent archers to help the king, but they never returned. Others went to battle in Angmar. By the way, I think this is explained in the very, very beginning of The Lord of the Rings when he's talking about the history of the hobbits. This is also explained there in different details. Yeah, and it says afterwards in the peace that followed, the Shire folk ruled themselves. They chose a Thane in the place of a king. First Shire Thane was Buka of the Marish, from whom the Old Bucks claimed descent. So after Arvedwy died, it says the Dunedain were now few, and the peoples of Eriador were diminished, yet the line of kings continued, with Aranarth, son of Arvedwy, and then he fostered his son Arahale in Rivendell. And this is the beginning. Okay, so this is the beginning of when it says all the sons of the chieftains after him were fostered in Rivendell, and they kept the heirlooms of their house there. The ring of Barahir, the shards of Narsil, the Star of Elendil, and the Scepter of Anuminus. So after this, once their kingdom had ended, it says the Dunedain passed into the shadows and became a secretive and wandering people, so nomads, with their deeds and labors seldom sung or recorded. Little of them now is remembered since Elrond departed. Although even before the watchful peace ended, evil things began to attack Eriador. Okay. Aragorn the First, it said, was slain by wolves, whichever remained in peril. In the days of Arhad, the orcs came. And then in 2509, Celebrian, the wife of Elrond, was journeying to Lorien when she was waylaid in the Redhorn Pass. She was seized by the orcs and carried off, pursued and rescued by Eladin and Elrohir, but not before she had suffered a torment and received a poisoned wound. Though she was healed in body, she lost all delight in Middle-earth and went over the havens and passed to the sea. After all of these time, there were 15 chieftains, says, before the 16th and last was born, Aragorn II, who became king of Gondor and Arnor. Our king, we call him. And when he comes north to his house and Anuminus restored and stays for a while like Evidem, everyone in the Shire is glad. Oh, wait. Is this... Maybe it's not Gimli who's writing this. Is this written by Bilbo or... Hold on. I don't remember who wrote this, and it hasn't told me yet who's writing this. Is it Bilbo or Frodo? It says here Thane Peregrine has been there many times. And so his master Samwise the Mayor, his daughter Eleanor the Fair. It's one of the maids of Queen Evanstar. It says, although their power departed and their people dwindled, the lives of the Dunedain, and although the length of lives of the Dunedain grew ever less, many of the chieftains of the north still lived to twice the age of men, and far beyond the days even the oldest among them. Aragorn, indeed, lived to be 210 years old, longer than any of his lines since King Arvagil. But in Aragorn Elisar, the dignity of the kings of old was renewed. All right, so that's part 3. I'm not going to continue beyond here because there's a ton of information to dissect there, because the next part is on Gondor's and the heirs of Anarion, which is a whole nother, you have Isildur and Anarion, so we've got two different families whose, if I can get that centered on the screen, screw it, my hands are bad. So we just talked about Isildur and his heirs, and now we're going to talk about Gondor and the heirs of Anarion on the other side. That's a lot to dissect. And who wrote this? I'm going to Google this really quick because I don't remember who wrote the Appendices. Not Tolkien, of course, though. Appendices. It says j.r.r. Tolkien, but I want to know whose point of view. Tolkien is the narrator. It's based on historical notes made by Frodo Baggins compiled. Okay. Frodo is the narrative source. Okay. For some reason, I was thinking it might have been somebody different. But that's Frodo. Anyway, folks, what's really cool to me, and I am going to talk about the Lord of the Rings Online again, because there's a lot of cool stuff here that they cover in that game, like being able to go to... So I've done the Lotro Tourism series, and I just realized that there's a bunch of stuff I could still go see and do that I haven't done. So, as an example, you can go to Farokel. You can go to Farokel, and the boat, the remnants of the king's boat, which we just read about, is actually there. You can actually go there, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you actually do a series of quests for the ghost of the king. So they play around with the lore a little fast and loose, but it is fun to be able to go in and like do quests and see those areas. I mean, Rivendell is always the big place because it's still there and Elrond is there and everything else. But being able to go into places like Farokel and see the remnants of things from many, many years ago, that's really cool. And of course, the Barrow-Downs and the Barrow-Wights and I swear that quest is like called the Prince of Cardoon or something like that. But a lot of stuff we're just reading about, you can actually go, especially because the first part of the Lord of the Rings Online was called The Shadows of Angmar. So it's all about going up into Angmar and dealing with the Witch King and the resurgence of the Witch King, and everything else before you go to Moria and follow in the footsteps of the Fellowship of the Ring. So there's a ton of information from what we just read, which actually you play through in the game, which is really cool. And Easter eggs and stuff, because there's also Evendim and Anuminus, and it's a really cool quest actually that you get in... from Aragorn in Rivendell I want to say it's around level 40 or 50. I think it's around 40. But it starts off as a solo quest, but it eventually ends up requiring a group to go into the tombs of Illuminus for some stuff related to the shards of Narsil. Anyway, um, hopefully you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you'll be sticking around for the next one, which is next Monday as we continue to read through the appendices of The Lord of the Rings here in the Mondays in Middle-earth show. Until next time, everybody, thanks so much for listening. As always, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Support if you can. Super chats, super thanks, memberships here on the channel and beyond. Until next time, stay safe and happy reading.